Welcome, Anime Stark viewers. Get ready for Part 5 of Naruto and My Hero Academia - the crossover you never knew you needed. Let's dive in. A half-hour break had been scheduled before the third stage of the festival so that participants could rest, and spectators could stretch their legs. If we focus on one of the students, we see Naruto sitting on a wooden bench, looking at nothing in particular. He was alone because Ibara was taken by her classmates to congratulate her on reaching the third stage. Despite her attempts to get him to go with her, the religious girl couldn't convince the shinobi. He could see his classmates' glances. It seemed his fame made socializing more complicated for him. He sighed heavily and tightened the bandages on his right arm. Dealing with the kids had been interesting, though not much of a challenge. He hoped the next stage would be more difficult or interesting. He lowered his hand to the ground and took a plastic bottle they had given him, opened it, and started drinking. "What are you doing?" The shinobi didn't need to think much about who was now in front of him. "Drinking water. If you want some, just ask," he said aloud. After all, he was alone. In front of the bench where he sat was the powerful self-proclaimed strongest of the Bijus, Kyuubi, in human form. She was a hot redhead with a body and measurements that many would doubt were real, and those fox ears and tails weren't helping at all. It was exotic and provocative. "You've been too quiet lately. It's strange." He raised the bottle and offered it to the redhead, who gave him a darker look. The Biju's response was to swipe the bottle, making it fly away and fall into the distance. The kitsune's red eyes met the deep blue of the Uzumaki, and the atmosphere was so heavy and dense that it could be cut with a knife. "Have I been quiet for too long? I've known you since you came out of that damned bitch Kushina. You think competing and following the rules of this system make you like them. You've been restraining yourself and holding back ever since you've been with those kids." "To the point, Kyuubi," interrupted the Uzumaki, who frowned while looking at his prisoner within him. "Teaming up with that nun, helping and advising that crybaby kid. I'll tell you again, what are you doing?" she asked seriously and irritably, emitting a red aura that was invisible to everyone but generated a sense of fear or discomfort within a range of 100 meters, making those around inexplicably uneasy. "Forgetting and living," was the simple response from the shinobi who stood up to face the Biju, who was the same height as him. "I'm tired of running. This is an opportunity to just do the right thing." The shinobi gave a haughty look when the redhead moved her threatening tails from side to side. "Being something you're not? A hero?" The cold question, accompanied by the mocking smile of the redhead, made the blonde frown. "Do you think helping cats get out of trees and stopping villains will change who you are? Where's that cold shinobi who didn't hesitate to draw his sword to deal with those who stood in his way? Even if you try, you can't change who you are. You're not a hero, you're not like them, you can never leave everything in the past. Naruto. Like you, who can never let go of that hatred." This question caught the redhead off guard, and she growled slightly, baring her fangs. "Be careful what you say from now on." The Biju threatened with a deep voice, making her 9 tails move slowly and threateningly around both of them. Her red eyes with slit pupils glowed crimson, reflecting pure power, but all of this didn't intimidate the blonde, who stood his ground. "Since when have you carried all that hatred, Kyuubi? Since you were born from the Sage of the Six Paths, you said you were created along with your brothers centuries ago. Will you ever leave all that behind to give humans a chance?" The Uzumaki sighed and just looked away, running his hand through his hair. "Or at least, will you tell me your name?" The title of Kyuubi gets annoying to repeat. The response was the redhead's hands wrapping around his neck. "You. And no one else deserves to know it," she said, tightening her grip, and he watched as her form slowly began to fade, giving him one last look. "The day I tell you my name, I'll consider you my equal and ally, and we both know that will never happen." Saying that, she disappeared, leaving the Uzumaki standing where he was. In silence, he sat back down, looking at nothing. At least this was a small step by his standards with the sealed fox inside him. He sighed and pressed his hand against the seal on his stomach. He had used his left side. He had lost control and unconsciously used it, and that was something he couldn't overlook. Shiori stood at a safe distance, looking at the shinobi from her class, who was sitting on a bench, resting. With a somber look, she ran her hand over the burn on her left eye. "Of course, kid, of course." Clenching her fists, she could only growl at the memory of Uzumaki's audacity, treating her like a mere little girl. Just remembering his smile when he touched her hair brought back bad memories. Her mother was the only person who did that, and now that he was doing it, it only brought back unpleasant thoughts. "Unless we're playing hide and seek, there's no need for you to hide." Todoroki instantly tensed upon hearing the shinobi's voice, who was still sitting on the bench with his back turned. Seeing that staying at a distance was pointless, She approached to stand in front of the bench, and the shinobi stood up at the same time. "Do you have something to say?" he asked calmly, looking at the mixed-haired teenager. "Yes. I need to talk to you." Setting aside any emotions on her face, Shiori stared fixedly at the boy in front of her. "I have to say that you're the only one my age who has surpassed me. Your strength, speed, agility, and quirks are the things that make you better than me. So I must surpass you and beat you at all costs." Naruto felt curious about the intense gaze the half-redhead was giving him. Beyond the challenge, he sensed anger and rage, difficult to determine if it was directed at him or someone else. Naruto shrugged and was about to turn and leave. He had no interest in the girl's threats and challenges. However, before he could go, he heard the girl speak again. "Endeavor is my father, something you probably already know." Like everyone else, the Todoroki girl revealed, something Naruto already knew but hadn't paid much attention to until now, "and I'm also sure you know he's been stuck as the number 2 hero for a long time. So if you are somehow connected to the number 1 hero, All Might, that means I have more reasons to defeat you." Before the teenager could continue, she was interrupted by the shinobi who was standing with his arms crossed. "I have no connection to All Might, and I have no plans to be a hero in the future," the blonde commented lazily, sighing heavily. He wasn't in the mood after the argument he had with his prisoner, but he couldn't take out his anger and frustration on the girl in front of him, so he let her continue to say what she had to say. "But you're here now, and from what I saw of your performance in the second stage of the festival, it seems you're aiming for the top spot." At no point did the girl avert her gaze from Naruto. Gaining a darker expression, she continued speaking, "My father is an ambitious man, he desires the top spot." Naruto felt that the subject seemed to affect her more than it should, given the tension and rigid posture. The heterochromatic girl looked down at the ground and used her right hand to grasp her left arm. "But my father never gave up, he still tries. His ambition is to surpass All Might one way or another. Have you ever heard of quirk marriages?" Todoroki asked hesitantly. "Quirk marriages?" Naruto repeated with uncertainty. He knew the basics of the subject, which were too similar to marriages arranged to ensure a person inherits more than one Kekkei Genkai. In the elemental nations, such unions were rarely carried out because the clans were too reserved and strict about who could be their descendants. The chances of an Uchiha and an Uzumaki having offspring were slim, as were the chances of a Hyuga and a Senju. It was likely that no one engaged in such unions for a simple reason: no one knew what kind of unstoppable monster or being could be born from the combination of two Kekkei Genkai. Looking at the girl's appearance and hearing her story, it was evident that she was the product of a relationship intended to create a definitive being with the power to control both fire and ice, a strange but deadly combination. They were a problem after the first generation of people with powers, once quirks became the norm. There were people who specifically sought partners based on their quirks to strengthen their own by passing them on to their descendants and creating powerful children. Many people were forced into these relationships, thinking they were just like arranged marriages from ancient times, but clearly, it wasn't ethical, Todoroki explained while Naruto nodded, absorbing this new piece of information, which didn't seem to surprise him. He already knew that people would do anything for power. "But my father was a man with recognition, but above all, with money to solve his problems. He bought my mother's parents and thus managed to get his hands on her power, believing it was the key piece for his plan. To create me to achieve his goal, a hero capable of surpassing All Might," Todoroki revealed, causing the shinobi to be completely serious. It was expected that Endeavor's ambition was as great as to do something as unpleasant as forcing someone into a loveless marriage just to fulfill his desire to be better than All Might. "But there's even more truth, Shiori," thought the shinobi with a certain sadness. "When an arranged marriage takes place, it's known that, in some cases, the woman was forced to have relations with her betrothed. In other words, she might be the result of a violation." Taking a deep breath, the blonde could only feel empathy for her, or at least inside, as on the outside, he remained impassive and serious. "It's really annoying," said Todoroki, narrowing her eyes and clenching her fists in annoyance. "I refuse to become that scum's tool," she declared with conviction and hatred. "In all my memories, my mother is always crying," she spoke while gazing at her left hand, which she slowly brought to the left side of her face, showing traces of a long burn. "Your left side is an abomination," I remember my mother saying one day as she poured boiling water on my face. I remember her look: she was afraid of me, she hated me, she felt disgust for me. My own mother wanted me dead. I'm only her daughter because my father forced her to do it." Taking a deep breath, she passed her arms over her eyes to wipe away the small tears that were forming. After a few moments, the girl calmed down and regained her composure to give the shinobi a cold look. The reason I want to fight you is to show that scum of a father what I can do without needing to use his damn quirk." Saying that, she felt even more anger when she saw that Uzumaki didn't even show any emotion. "You wouldn't understand." Grumbling those words, she was about to leave, but she didn't get far before hearing the blonde speak again. "Maybe not, but I always felt the love of a father and a mother. But when I lost my father as a child, several things changed. I made wrong decisions, but at the same time, I made the right ones for a greater good. But my mother." Furrowing his brow, the teenager opened his jacket and exposed the upper part of his body. Shiori was momentarily paralyzed when she saw the dozens of scars on the blonde's torso and chest, but what stood out the most was a deep diagonal cut that ran from his right shoulder to the last rib on the left side of his body. "The last time I saw my mother, she did this to me. She tried to kill me, and this scar was the last thing she left me," he calmly spoke, pointing to the largest scar he had. "She?" Still doubting, the teenage girl stepped back. It was foreign to her to see such scars from wounds. She didn't expect that Uzumaki would share part of his past. Her own mother had tried to kill him with a sword, but he still showed affection and love towards her. Did he still love his mother after what she had done? That question only left the Todoroki girl in doubt, lost in her thoughts. "She looked at me with hatred, rage, sadness, fear, and disappointment. I remember everything that happened when I was 14. The last thing she told me was that she had lost her son. We all have turbulent pasts, Shiori, some more than others. But what sets us apart is how we deal with them." Putting his jacket back on, he walked past the white and red-haired girl, but not before using his right hand to caress her hair. "See you around, kid." He then put his hands in his pockets and calmly returned to the stadium. It seemed that the third and final stage was about to begin. Left behind, an impassive Shiori ran her hand through her head, right where Uzumaki had placed his hand. Frowning, she headed back to the stadium, lost in her thoughts. Naruto was sitting on the grass in the field where the festival had taken place, patiently waiting for everything to start. While he was having a moment of peace, he heard the other students talking loudly, which was annoying. Sighing, he took a moment to close his eyes and meditate in the lotus position with his hands together. "Doesn't he remind you of a Jedi?" Near Naruto, there was a group of students, including some from Class B. Among them was Ibara, who was watching her friend meditate. "Although, considering his attitude and the way he handles electricity, I consider him a Sith," commented Kendo, the orange-haired girl, who smiled playfully as she thought of those references. "Itsuka-san, I remind you that not all of us are familiar with your analogies from American pop culture." Yui Kodai, a girl with dark, straight hair and a curvaceous figure that easily surpassed her classmates, replied seriously and expressionless. "It's not my fault you didn't have a childhood," the class president said with a smirk, elbowing her green vine-haired friend playfully. Smirking mischievously, she moved closer to her friend and looked at the distracted Todoroki. "So, Ibara-chan, what can you tell us about our dark friend? He doesn't seem as bad as everyone says," she said, looking at her fellow classmate who had been staring at Uzumaki all this time. "He scares me. Didn't you see the things he did? Seeing him in action today tells me he's more dangerous than they say," the short, mushroom-headed girl said fearfully. Her thoughts were shared by some of her classmates who still distrusted the shinobi. "Are you sure you want to be friends with someone like him?" she asked, looking at her religious friend with concern. Ibara frowned in response. "If only you knew Naruto-kun the way I do, you wouldn't say that. I'm tired of your comments, that's why." "Forgive me for this," Class B girls didn't have a chance to respond as Ibara's hair grew and wrapped around them. In panic, they found themselves being dragged towards where Uzumaki was. "Hello, Naruto-kun. I hope you don't mind that I'm interrupting now. I want to introduce you to some friends." Before the other girls could say anything, they were in front of the shinobi and being released from their bindings. Opening his eyes, Naruto found himself facing 6 Class B girls, if he remembered correctly. Among them was Shiazashi. "Ibara, you don't need to drag your friends into awkward conversations," he sighed heavily and got up to take a closer look at the teenagers in front of him. "But they really want to get to know you. Plus, I've told you not to eavesdrop on other people's conversations. Having good hearing doesn't mean you should listen to other people's conversations," scolded the teenage evangelical girl. She crossed her arms and looked at the shinobi, who simply shrugged off the importance of what his only friend had said. Ibara glanced at her friends who were still standing there, but under her companion's gaze, they had to give in. "Nice to meet you, Ibara-chan talked a lot about you, Uzumaki-san. I'm Itsuka Kendo, the president of Class B. These are Reiko Yanagi." She introduced herself first and then pointed to a teenager with white hair and a slender figure who had bags under her darkened eyes. "Hello," was the simple greeting from the girl who had a voice that seemed like a ghostly whisper. "This is Pony Tsunotori." This time, the class president introduced a young girl with blonde hair and horns on her head, in addition to her unique appearance resembling a pony. "Hello, great Mr. Uzumaki, I hope we can be friends." The nervous girl apparently could only speak in her native language, making her companion sigh at this. "Do not call me Mr., just Naruto is enough, I was never one for formalities. I hope we can be partners too." More than one person dropped their jaw at the pronunciation and English language skills the shinobi displayed. The pony girl, excited to find someone who spoke her language, seemed to forget her fear from just seconds ago. "I didn't know you spoke other languages," Ibara said, still impressed, watching as her friend just shrugged. "Before coming to Japan, I spent some time in America, to be more precise, the United States. I had to learn their language," he explained calmly, which only increased the interest of some. It seemed like the boy had been to more countries and different continents than it appeared. That was an interesting tidbit. "Well, as I was saying, now she is Setsuna Tokage." This time, it was the turn of a tall girl with green hair and oddly longer arms than normal, who awkwardly greeted the shinobi with a handshake. "And lastly, she's Yui Kodai." With the last introduction, a tense atmosphere formed between the two young individuals, their icy glares colliding, and the others felt intimidated by the cold stare that their companion was giving the shinobi, who returned it with the same intensity. The beautiful black-haired girl never looked away and, instead, approached the shinobi even closer. "Are those mustaches real?" "Huh?" Naruto couldn't help but lose his composure upon hearing the incredulous scream of the other girls, who were confused by the serious and cold student's question. "Yes, they are," he replied calmly, only to see the girl get closer to him, her eyes gleaming strangely. "Can I touch them? They look just like a kitten's." "I'll be gentle, I promise." Ibara felt her jaw almost drop when she witnessed such audacity. Was it vulgar? It was hard to say, but it was unfair for her to do it. She had always been curious about the strange markings on her friend's face. "Let me." Yui took a step forward, raising her hands to approach, but at the same time, the shinobi stepped back. "No, nice to meet you," Naruto said. With that, he turned on his heels and walked away from the strange teenager who apparently didn't like the rejection. Dismissing that, he continued to walk and listen as the speakers turned on, and Present Mike began to speak. "Now that lunchtime is over, it's time to reveal the final event of this festival," announced Present Mike's voice over the stadium speakers, and the audience focused their attention on the screens, awaiting the revelation. "But before that, we have good news for those who didn't make it to the finals," Present Mike said excitedly. "After all, this is a sports festival, and we've prepared various recreational games for everyone to participate in." Several participants headed towards the playfield, surprised by the cheerleaders moving in unison and cheering them on. Some of the boys even kept their gaze fixed on some of the prettiest cheerleaders in the group. "We've even brought professional cheerleaders from America to liven up this party." Several members of the audience took the opportunity to take photos of the foreigners, who could definitely be described as sexy. "Huh?" Aizawa's voice came through the microphone, grabbing everyone's attention. "One moment, dear audience," Present Mike said, surprised, just like his colleague. On the field of play, a new group of cheerleaders appeared, but these were certainly not the cheerleaders hired by UA. "What are they doing?" Aizawa commented, not understanding why the girls from his class were on the playfield in cheerleader uniforms. "It seems like the 1A girls went straight for the fan service. What a twist." Present Mike said, trying to contain his laughter because the faces of his students clearly showed that they had been deceived. While the girls were embarrassed and making a national spectacle of themselves, Mineta and Kaminari could only congratulate each other on the success of their plan, with lecherous looks on their faces as they observed the girls. Momo, realizing that they had been deceived upon seeing the two boys' faces, knew she should have chosen her words more carefully with Mineta. "Mineta, Kaminari. You deceived us, didn't you?" Momo shouted at the two boys, angry and disappointed for not realizing the pervert's plan. "You're going to regret this." Before Mineta and Kaminari could boast about their success, they felt a chill run down their spines. Looking behind them, they found a stern and serious Naruto standing with his arms crossed. "You know, I don't really like perverts. Be careful when this is all over and you go back home. You never know what crazy person you might encounter on your way." His indirect warning was enough to make both teenagers gulp and lose color in their faces. It seemed like this prank had a price they wouldn't want to pay. With a sigh, Momo dropped to her knees, letting out a disappointed sigh. Why do I always end up falling for Minata's schemes? She said to herself sadly. Ochako, being a good friend, knelt beside the black-haired girl with a smile, patting her on the back to cheer her up. After all, it wasn't just her fault since none of them had seen the truth in Minata's words. I even used my quirk to make the uniforms, she said, regretful. Ugh, Jiro exclaimed in frustration, tossing the pom-poms to the ground. Those idiots, she muttered under her breath. Meanwhile, Toru had a completely different opinion. There's still some time before the final event, and I like these uniforms, so. Suddenly, the invisible girl began to jump and move the pom-poms around. Why don't we go with the flow, she concluded, happy to do something that would catch everyone's attention. What? Jiro responded, terrified, feeling embarrassed to be outside in these outfits. Tsuyu, seeing her friend's excitement, commented with confidence, Toru-chan, do you really like this? She smiled, observing the silhouette of the invisible girl moving from side to side, cheering. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he watched the girls with their different attitudes, each of them enthusiastically cheering with pom-poms. It was strange how things worked in this world, but at least it wasn't so boring. Hearing a whip, he turned to see Midnight back on that stage rising in the middle of the green field, which was the stadium. Alright, it's time to draw who will fight against whom, and what better way to do it than leaving it to luck, she said, stirring the contents inside the box. After the matches are decided, we will begin the recreational events. Tournament participants can decide if they want to participate or if they prefer to use that time to prepare, as some will likely want to conserve their strength. Now, with the first team. Midnight walked toward the staircase of the platform, where the students would draw their opponents. But before the heroine could finish descending, a hand shot up among the students. Uzumaki Naruto didn't even bother to listen to the speech the monkey-like boy had to give. He and another student left, leaving a space that was occupied by a Class B individual with the ability to turn his skin into steel. However, what caught Naruto's attention was the strange power that someone named Shinzo had. He seemed to control the monkey-like boy and others, an interesting power that could be devastating in the wrong hands. For now, that was the only thing that piqued his interest. Very well. Swishing her whip, the black-haired woman pointed at the screen above her, which began to display the names of the tournament participants. When it stopped, everyone saw the results. Here are the matchups for the next and final stage of this year's UA Sports Festival. Preliminary match, Uzumaki Naruto vs Yaoyorozu Momo. First match, winner of the preliminary vs Midoriya Izuku. Second match, Todoroki Shiori vs Saruhanta. Third match, Ida Tenya vs Hatsume Mei. Fourth match, Kaminari Denki vs Shiozaki Ibara. Fifth match, Shinzo Hitoshi vs Tokoyami Fumikichi. Sixth match, Ashido Mina vs Aoyama Yuga. Seventh match, Tetsu vs Kirishima Eijiro. Eighth match, Bakugo Katsuki vs Uraka Ochako. Quarterfinals. Winner of the first match versus winner of the second match. Winner of the third match versus winner of the fourth match. Winner of the fifth match versus winner of the sixth match. Winner of the seventh match versus winner of the eighth match. There you have it. As you can see, we have an extra match due to an odd number of participants. Those who do not wish to participate in the recreational games and are participants in the third stage can take a 1-hour break until the tournament begins. With this announcement, the professional heroine stepped down from the stage to start the other games. Meanwhile, the tournament participants had different reactions. Some eagerly stayed to participate in the recreational games, while others chose to take a break, thinking about their future opponents for the day. The only one who didn't move from where she was Momo. As soon as she heard that she had to face the shinobi, she froze. Coming back to reality, all she could do was turn and see that many were looking at her with concern. That didn't bode well for her. Looking among the students, she found that Uzumaki was leaving the arena, showing no interest in participating in the recreational events. Not knowing what to do, she could only go somewhere alone to think. A great battle was coming for her, perhaps the biggest one in her life. Chapter 12. In a thriving village, abundant with trees that covered a large part of the town, all the inhabitants were busy with their respective tasks. The younger ones were attending either the ninja academy or civilian schools because it was their own choice whether to become a ninja to serve the village or not. Focusing on a specific area, we see an 8-year-old boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and curious marks on his cheeks resembling a feline's whiskers. The boy wore long dark pants and an orange jacket with a red swirl on his back. He carried basic ninja weapons on his right leg and in the back pocket. His hands and forearms were completely covered with bandages. Uzumaki Naruto was proudly displaying his newly acquired headband. He had just received the title of Jinan, which took years of training, determination, and shedding blood and tears to achieve. As he left the academy, he had a wide smile on his face, happy to take the first step toward becoming a ninja, worthy of the village, and fulfilling the promises he made to his father. Perhaps even stepping out of his shadow. Big sis, you did it. Naruto was brought back from his thoughts when a red blur crashed into him. He extended his arms and hugged a 4-year-old girl with long red hair and an orange kimono. You're the best. The girl with big blue eyes exclaimed with love and admiration as she saw the shiny headband tied around the blonde's forehead. What did you have to do? How many cool jutsus did you use? Did you fight someone? The endless questions from the little redhead only made the older Uzumaki brother smile. Natsumi-chan, you need to calm down, or your brother won't be able to answer you. A female voice came from nearby, belonging to Uchiha Mikoto, a beautiful adult woman with dark hair and pale skin. She had dark eyes, typical of the Uchiha clan, and was dressed in purple clothing with a brown apron. With a maternal smile, the raven-haired woman watched the sibling embrace with tenderness. Stop bothering Aniki. Dobi. Holding onto Uchiha Mikoto's hand was a 4-year-old girl, Satsuki Uchiha, with dark, straight hair that reached her shoulders. She had 2 large locks of hair that covered her face, pale skin, and shiny dark eyes. She was wearing a high-collared blue shirt and white shorts. Upon hearing the Uchiha girl's insult, Natsumi glared at her. Shut up, team. I'll make you cry. The red-haired girl was lifted by her older brother to prevent her from attacking the smaller Uchiha, who just huffed. She approached the blonde, separated from her mother, and tightly hugged Naruto's waist. Congratulations, Aniki, said little Satsuki, who hugged what she considered her second older brother after Itachi, who was standing near Uchiha Mikoto, dressed in dark clothes with a jounin vest on top. Congratulations, Naruto. Otosan apologizes for not being here, but he had to meet with the Uchiha police force for an emergency, calmly spoke the eldest son of the current head of their clan, extending his hand to shake Naruto's. The Uchiha's grip was met with a firm one from Naruto, who still held his younger sister and was embraced by Satsuki, giving teasing looks to Natsumi, who was squirming in her brother's grasp, trying to break free and give the Uchiha girl a beating. Thank you, Itachi. Naruto gave a strong handshake to the older Uchiha, then looked into the trees and spotted a relaxed Shisui, who was lounging on a branch and lazily greeted him. Thank you. Sensei. Naruto smiled at his sensei, who returned the smile and gave a thumbs up in approval. Lowering his gaze, Naruto released his younger sister and used his right hand to stroke the little Uchiha's hair, making her smile even more and hug him tighter. How about we celebrate with a dinner? Mikoto's offer excited the younger girls, and they nodded eagerly. But before they could leave, they heard footsteps approaching slowly. A person walked toward the small group in front of the academy, a beautiful woman with blood-red hair, bright purple eyes, and pale skin. She had an hourglass figure that even surpassed Uchiha Mikoto, featuring large D+-cup breasts, a small waist, and wide hips. She wore a tight-fitting mesh shirt that exposed her arms and cleavage. Over the mesh, she wore a dark jounin vest and red pants with white details. On her left hip, she had a katana with a dark hilt and a red swirl engraving, and she also wore a white cloak with red flames and a red hat with the fire Kenji symbol engraved on the front. She was Uzumaki Kushina, the 5th Hokage. Naruto. She smiled lightly as the red-haired Kage approached her son, and he did the same. The wind gently blew, causing tree leaves to fall upon the 2 Uzumakas as they locked eyes. An Uzumaki never gives up, the younger blonde finished the phrase, both wearing a more serious expression, just like the older redhead. Now that you're a shinobi, many challenges and dangers await you, my son. You're not just a soldier for this village, you're a pillar, a protector for the people who are part of this big family in Konoha. Are you ready for what lies ahead? The Uchihas and Natsumi watched from a distance, witnessing the scene unfolding in front of them and hearing the current leader's question directed at the younger blonde. Naruto struck his right fist against his heart with determination and bowed to his mother, no. His Hokage. With a glint of resolve, he looked into the Kage's eyes, waiting for an answer. I'm ready to give my life. To protect my home, and I promise, on my ninja path, that I won't fail you, Hokage-sama. I never break a promise. With that declaration, he lowered his head until his forehead touched the ground. A faint smile formed on Kushina's lips as she approached her son to affectionately caress his hair. I know you won't. After all, you never give up, do you? Opening his eyes, Naruto looked down to see that the pre-tournament games were still ongoing. He was currently sitting on the high walls of the stadium, observing everything from above. When he heard there would be recreational games, he expected something exciting but found teenagers playing childish games like scavenger hunts and races. Initially, he thought it was the silliest thing he had ever seen, but looking at it analytically, it was meant to entertain, to let the teenagers who were currently laughing and having fun enjoy these small moments. Just watching Ibara searching for a cat in the stadium as his task made him smile. They were all still young and living in a peaceful society with no major wars or conflicts among the great nations or within their own society, just tranquility. But this peace could be a double-edged sword. Peace was enjoyable, but it also softened and distorted the harsh reality. In peace, the weak live and grow old. In war, only the strongest survive. That was a phrase Uchiha Fugaku, Itachi and Satsuki's father, used to say. To this day, Naruto couldn't find a way to contradict that statement. Letting out a deep sigh, Naruto disappeared through a session of leaves, unseen by anyone, and reappeared in the Class A locker room. Entering the room, he saw several of his classmates waiting for the tournament to begin. Some were more tense than others. Walking to a locker, the shinobi retrieved another sports jacket that UA had provided, as the previous one was damaged during Bakugo's last attack in the cavalry battle. Once he had what he needed, he left the room. Phew. Taking a deep breath, Momo tried to calm herself. She was seated away from the door and relaxed when the blonde with whiskers had left the room. With her hands on the table, she played with her thumbs while glancing at the clock hanging on the wall. There were only about 3 minutes left before the tournament began. No one will think less of you if you don't want to fight. The young Yaoyorozu heard a concerned Uraka, who was sitting beside her, both wearing their respective sports festival outfits. I have to fight Bakugo. But I know that fighting him is less risky than fighting Uzumaki-san, she said with uncertainty, glancing at the explosive teenager who was sitting a bit farther away. But are you going to fight him anyway? Momo asked, biting her lower lip and fidgeting with her legs, wondering why she was so afraid. She had seen her future tournament opponent fight and knew she couldn't win, but what truly terrified her was the aftermath, along with the prospect of failing in front of a stadium full of people expecting a spectacular battle she couldn't deliver. She looked at the brown-haired teenager, who appeared equally unsure. Yes. I can't miss this opportunity. What about you? She asked the black-haired girl, who only looked down and then got up. I don't know. With that answer, she left the room. There were only a few minutes left before the match, and she couldn't afford to be late. Unbeknownst to her, a conversation was taking place just a few corridors behind her. Naruto was curiously observing how Momo headed straight for the fighting platform. You must be proud of her, he said aloud before turning around and looking analytically at a serious Majim Yaoyorozu, who was just a few steps away. The businesswoman was dressed in a dark formal suit with a knee-length skirt. I am, she quickly replied as she took her coat and adjusted it. Have you thought about my proposal? She asked, looking at the teenager who had his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on where her daughter had gone. I'm not interested, was Naruto's curt response as he turned his attention to the class president's mother. You should consider it. I'm not only offering you a substantial sum of money but also a powerful ally. You and I both know that the only reason you're not in jail is because I lent you a hand. Now I'm just asking you to return that favor. A tense atmosphere hung between the two, and the woman with dark hair didn't hesitate, looking into the Uzumaki's cold blue eyes. Do you want me to be the guardian of your daughter? The infamous Uzumaki Naruto, a killer and monster who should be locked up for the rest of his days, looking out for the safety of a pampered high society brat. The sarcasm and cynicism in the blonde's words made Majim furrow her brow. If you're trying to make me laugh, you're on the wrong track. Turning his back to the woman, he began to walk away. They will come back. Naruto stopped at the shout from the older Yaoyorozu. Looking at her again, he saw the seriousness in her expression. The League of Villains has already moved their pawns, and this is just the beginning. They will attack again sooner or later. I can't pull my daughter out of UA without crushing her dream of becoming a hero. But if there's someone powerful enough to intervene if necessary. The hint only caused the one-eyed blonde to raise an eyebrow. Shouldn't you have faith in your daughter? Naruto asked with mild sarcasm, hearing the cheers of the spectators in the stands, signaling that the tournament was about to begin. I have faith in my daughter, but like any mother, I'm worried about losing her. She spoke with firmness, gazing intensely at the shinobi, who continued to give her his back. So smart, self-assured, and cunning. Yet so blind at the same time. Walking away again, the blonde went to the exit to head to the fighting arena. Without looking at the older black-haired woman, he simply raised his hand in farewell. We'll see how much your daughter can do. Gritting her teeth in frustration, Mijim made her way to her VIP section to watch the tournament. This isn't over yet, she thought as she left to take her seat to witness her daughter's battle. Now that the recreational games have ended, let's get to what everyone has been waiting for. The final stage in the UA Sports Festival tournament is about to begin. With Present Mike's shout, everyone in the stands cheered in excitement as the long-awaited tournament was set to start. Now, in one corner, we have a girl with the highest academic average at UA. With a quirk that makes her relentless. Yaoyorozu Momo. As the professional hero introduced her, the girl emerged from the tunnel and made her way to the fighting arena. Everything is okay, Momo thought, trying to maintain a composed and calm demeanor on the outside. However, on the inside, she couldn't help but feel doubt and fear. The cheers from the spectators weren't helping, everyone expected so much from her. Arriving at the ring, she stood on one side, waiting for her opponent. The next contestant is someone with a bad reputation. But it doesn't seem to bother him. He's serious, powerful, cold, and as dark as the night. Uzumaki Naruto. The cheers from the audience immediately stopped, and a tense silence fell when the shinobi walked calmly to the battleground. This is awkward, Present Mike scratched the back of his neck awkwardly. The people in the stands looked on with doubt, repulsion, and dislike for the shinobi, who was already on the other side of the ring. Naruto discreetly noticed that both examiners, Midnight and Cementos, were tense and alert. Looking at the fighting arena, he saw it was a flat 50 square meter area of pure concrete, with corners emitting flames for some strange reason. Listen up. With a whip of her lash, the professional hero got everyone's attention. The rules are simple. If either of you steps out of the ring, you automatically lose. If one of the participants gives up, the other wins. If one is knocked out, they also lose. Finally, if it's evident that attacks are going to be lethal or things are going too far, the fight will be stopped automatically, and the one who breaks that last rule will be disqualified. Understood? She yelled the last part, looking at both teenagers. Hi, Momo yelled, taking a defensive stance and locking her gaze on her opponent. Nodding, Naruto remained with his arms crossed, patiently waiting for the battle to begin. Seeing that both contestants were ready, Nemuri raised her right hand and lowered it. Begin. With that final shout, the battle commenced. I need to keep my distance and come up with a plan. Mentally agreeing with herself, Momo shifted her footing slightly to see that the blonde in front of her still had his arms crossed. Several drops of sweat formed on the teenage girl's forehead, and her hands shook uncontrollably. Naruto noticed this and slowly moved his arms. Do you feel scared? Asked the blonde guy with his usual dry and indifferent voice. He had seen the girl trying to smile with confidence. Not at all, replied the dark-haired girl defiantly. She already had a plan in mind. But, opening her eyes with disbelief, she saw the blonde guy standing in front of her. Reacting in time, she created a shield of steel on her right arm and covered herself from a punch that hit her shield with force. Ouch! She groaned. The teenager flew several meters backward, falling on her back, sliding painfully. With great pain, she got up as fast as she could and had to release her shield to cradle her right arm, which hurt too much from the blow. How, lowering her gaze, she saw with fear how her small shield had a large dent. She had underestimated the shinobi, thinking he wouldn't use so much strength against her. He could have broken my arm, she thought in fear while getting to her feet, only to see a silhouette approaching her. Before the teenager could do anything, she received a devastating blow to her stomach, making her lose her breath and even feel bile rising in her throat. Falling to her knees, she could only hold her stomach in agony and try to recover. Lifting her head as best as she could, she saw the cold eyes of Uzumaki, who was by her side. You should be afraid. Raising his right fist, Naruto struck Momo's right cheek, ending with her head hitting the hard concrete. A deathly silence fell over the stadium. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. Yaoyorozu was lying motionless on the ground after such a blow. As for the shinobi, he simply began to walk out of the ring. Midnight saw Uzumaki walking through the arena, swallowing her anger. She knew the blonde hadn't violated any rules. He had won fairly. The thoughts of the heroine were shared by the spectators, who began to boo and curse Uzumaki. You're a coward. She's just a girl. Idiot. Pick on someone your own size, you animal. You should be ashamed. You're a bastard. The last comment came from a tall, muscular man with a slim build. In his fit of anger, he took the can in his hand and threw it at Uzumaki. Raising his right hand, Naruto caught the can and crushed it, making it explode. With a somber look, he squeezed the can's remains into a misshapen sphere and threw it at the man, who fell when it struck his forehead. Now, Everyone began to throw whatever they had at hand at the blonde, who remained standing in the middle of the ring. Momo-chan. Among the participants and students of UA, we see a worried Mina covering her mouth to avoid screaming at the sight of one of her friends lying motionless on the ground. The pink-skinned girl wasn't the only one who saw the class president being brutally beaten. That wasn't necessary, Uzumaki. Kirishima stood up from his seat to shout and glare angrily at the one-eyed blonde who was still in the ring. Several other students from Class 1A shared this feeling of anger toward one of their classmates. Todoroki, with his typical calm expression, only watched this with calmness. His speed is monstrous, the red and white-haired girl calmly thought, crossing her arms, and continued to watch how everything would unfold. Bakugo watched everything with seriousness. He didn't seem upset by what he had just witnessed, or maybe he just didn't care much about the condition of the class president. Near him was Midoriya, who was sitting in his seat, watching everything with uncertainty. He rubbed his hands nervously and could only continue to observe, just like the others. Naruto. Ibara had to look away to avoid seeing the girl lying on the ground. She knew her friend was someone extreme and violent, but even this was too much for her. In the most privileged area of the stadium, there was a somber Majim Yaoyorozu sitting in a wooden chair on a balcony that provided an excellent view of the fight. Clenching her nails into the seat, she remained calm as she continued to observe. The contestant. Uzumaki Naruto, still uncertain, present Mike watched as the people in the seats only felt indignation and rage against Uzumaki. Looking at his colleague, he saw that he was serious, silently observing everything. Seeing that his opponent can't continue. He is the Stop. All eyes focused on one spot, and present Mike stopped speaking to watch as Momo got up in the fighting arena. Clumsily, the girl managed to stand. I can still. The dark-haired girl, once on her feet, wiped the blood trickling down from her forehead with her right arm. Her hair was disheveled, and a dark bruise had formed on her cheek from the last blow of her opponent. After cleaning the blood, she conjured a piece of cloth in her hands and tied it around her forehead. I can still fight, she said while defiantly looking at the shinobi, who sighed and glanced back at her. You should have stayed on the ground, were the dry words of the blonde, who heard the annoyed shouts from the spectators cheering for the girl. Why are you smiling? He asked with doubt as he saw the girl smiling. She extended her arms to create two metal spheres and then placed them on the ground as she knelt. It's just that. Thank you. Those words made Naruto raise an eyebrow in confusion, and he wasn't the only one. Several others felt puzzled too. Thank you for treating me as your equal and not holding back, she said, lifting her hands slightly so that they glowed weakly, depositing a substance on the spheres. In this world, it doesn't matter if you're a child, a girl, a woman, or a man. Those things don't matter when you're in a fight, Naruto said as he began to walk toward his opponent, who had stood up with these semi-spheres in each hand. In the future, you'll face people who will beat you up and make you understand the true meaning of pain, only then will they kill you. You have a very dark view of the world, Uzumaki-san, said the girl, watching as the blonde was just a few steps away from her. Swallowing hard, Momo took a few steps back. Since I was a child, I've seen the darkness. Instead of fearing it like many do, I accepted it and became a part of it, Naruto said. With these words, he rushed at the girl again, extending his arm to catch her. But instead of retreating, she took the two spheres and clashed them together, resulting in a bright flash of light. Chlorate and magnesium create a flash of light, thought the girl. She closed her eyes tightly while holding the sphere over her head, producing a blinding flash of light that made everyone in the stadium cover their eyes. However, the one who had the most trouble was Naruto, who didn't manage to react to this unexpected move by his opponent. I underestimated her. The shinobi stepped back, closing his exposed eye. He grumbled and opened it only to see a blotch. Cursing himself, he listened to footsteps and the sound of objects falling. Blind, Uzumaki remained attentive to his hearing. Improved senses mean extreme sensitivity. Momo reached Naruto with a metal rod in her hands and tried to hit him, but the blonde easily caught the bar. Gritting her teeth in frustration, Momo realized he could hear her. Every step she took was heard by him, helping him locate her. It's over. Naruto easily broke the girl's weapon and threw a punch where she was supposed to be. Strangely, he only heard the shattering of glass. Momo had removed her jacket, leaving her in a dark sports bra. She had made a glass panel appear in front of her from her arms. Stepping back, the girl made a slight shine in her ears, causing rubber plugs to appear, covering the insides of her ears. I can do it. Taking two pieces of glass from the ground, she made one edge scrape against the other, producing a horrible screech that made those closest in the seats cover their ears. Even Naruto, who had his senses sharpened from a life as a ninja, took the worst of it. Dazed, he was forced to cover his ears. "I can do it." Creating a rope that came from her stomach, she tied it to a heavy metal sphere she created from her chest. Tying the end of the rope to a piece of steel, she began to spin, gaining momentum. With a scream of effort, she made the sphere fly towards Naruto. Still dazed and barely regaining his vision, the shinobi launched a right hook that made the steel ball fly back towards the girl, who threw herself to the ground to avoid being hit. Dragging herself along the ground, she stopped when Naruto stepped on her back, forcing her to halt. "Not bad, kid. You surprised me." With firmness, the blonde, with bandages, stepped on the teenager's back, immobilizing her. "You told me I have the potential to be the best, and you know." The girl carefully pulled a dark device with a red button from her pocket, lifting her gaze. The black-haired girl smiled at the shinobi. "You were right." Pressing the button, she made a click sound, and Naruto raised an eyebrow, focusing on where the sound came from. Only to hear the cannon explosion at the arena's edge. The cannonball hit Uzumaki directly in the chest, sending him flying off the ground and separating him from his opponent, skidding several meters to the edge of the ring. But just inches from falling out, Naruto planted his feet on the ground, remaining still. The blonde stood with his head down and the cannonball embedded in his chest, which slowly detached and fell heavily to the ground, thin lines of blood running from his wound. The entire stadium was on edge, thinking that Uzumaki would eventually fall. However, to the disbelief and annoyance of many, the shinobi remained standing. Not only that, but he now bent down to pick up the metal sphere and play with it, swinging it up and down. "Indeed, you're impossible to bring down," admitted Momo, who got up from the ground as best she could, holding her right arm in pain. She smiled bitterly. That had been her plan. Seeing how Naruto approached with the cannonball in his hands, he looked serious and not at all tired or in pain from the projectile that hit his chest. Looking closer, she noticed that the wound seemed painful but not very deep, yet the big mustached teenager remained unfazed by it. "Good plan," he said, coming to a stop in front of the girl. He dropped the cannonball heavily on the ground. "Distracting me with attacks that affect my senses and using a finishing move to get me out of the arena was a good strategy, though not good enough." He raised his right hand and lightly tapped the girl's forehead. She took a few steps back, eventually falling out of the arena on her back. In silence, Momo lowered her head to see that she had fallen out of the combat area. Sighing, she fell on her back and looked up at the sky. Uzumaki Naruto is the winner. Midnight's announcement only gained total silence from the stadium, to the discomfort of several. "You have it tough, young Uzumaki," thought All Might, who looked emaciated and frail, sitting with some colleagues from work. The older blonde man noticed that people were still skeptical of the teenage ninja. "But that doesn't affect you, and maybe that's for the best. Besides, I know that behind that cold, indifferent, and maybe dark demeanor, there's a good person just trying to do the right thing." The sixth user of All for One smiled when he saw Naruto offering a hand to Yaoyorozu to help her up. "Great battle, ladies and gentlemen. Participant Yaoyorozu showed great strategy, although it didn't work, it was excellent. Now, with Uzumaki Naruto advancing from this preliminary, he will face Midoriya Izuku in about 10 minutes. I hope you're ready for that." While the professional hero continued speaking, we returned to the battlefield, where Momo, extending her left arm, accepted the shinobi's help to stand up. But instead of saying anything, he just maintained his serious expression, turned around, and walked away. In response, the young black-haired girl sighed in disappointment. "Hey, girl," lifting her head quickly, Momo saw that Naruto had stopped. "You did well." Without turning, he continued on his way to the dressing room, waiting to be called for the next fight. Smiling, young Yaoyorozu could only be happy to have earned some respect from the shinobi. Walking slowly, holding her arm, she went to the infirmary to be treated. After all, the beating she had received had left her with several bruises, cuts, and almost a broken arm. Although she couldn't do much against Uzumaki, it was worth the fight.